Hello and welcome to the Talking NorCal podcast, the official podcast of Active NorCal. I am your host, Zach O'Brien. With me here, as always, it's Tenaya Bob.
Tenaya Bob.
Tenaya
I like
Bob.
that. Okay, all right, I'll take that
Yeah.
today. You hesitated saying your name, so that was a bit weird because it's like, do you not?
Because I was thinking,
yeah, I know what was going through your head.
once again, this is our however many podcasts. I've given you a nickname, and this is the however many podcast. I have not thought of that nickname before I say
You
it.
might have had one playing in the first one.
Yeah, I think Bigfoot Bob. I thought of that one when we did a Bigfoot one, Bigfoot podcast.
Tenaya Bob.
Tenaya Bob.
We'll describe why coming
And
up.
we'll tell you why after that. Today we have a very special episode. We're not doing any news of the week. We don't have a guest on. We wanted to talk about some different legends here in Northern California. So this podcast is the top 10 legends of Northern California. And these are different stories and fables that are around Northern California that I'm fascinated with. I love these types of stories, and I love, especially when you go visit different places, to know these different stories and have these in your back pocket. A lot of my friends make fun of me because I'm full of like a bunch of different facts.
I think these are really cool because these are bar stories. These are stories that when you're sitting at the bar, just chalking it up with the old men.
These are bar stories that really cannot be proven. And you know how I always say this, Google's like ruined the bar argument.
Sure.
Because everyone, like, you have an argument about sports or something and you immediately just Google it and say, no, this happened. But these types of stories you can talk about, you can discuss, and there's no way you can put fact to it. At least not today. Some of these you might be able to prove in the future, but at least not today. So we're going to have a lot of fun. We have 10 legends to discuss with you. First, before we hop into it, smash that subscribe button on our podcast. We do all of our podcasts on everywhere you can get your podcasts: Stitcher, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio. Subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. Also, check us out on YouTube, Talking NorCal. We post these full videos to our Talking NorCal page, as well as different clips to the Active NorCal YouTube page. So subscribe to us wherever you get anything. We want to be in your eyeballs and in your eardrums because we got a lot of fun content for today. So let's hop right into this. I'm really excited for this episode. Let's hop in with the Tahoe's Hella NorCal.
NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and I could spend all day just chilling in the South Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and Darren knows how to do kick it down in Santa Cruz. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we get a little cray-cray when we visit the East Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal.
So we made this list based on, some of our favorite fables and legends here in Northern California. This doesn't cover everything, unfortunately. There were some other things that I wanted to talk about, some different alien stuff, some different, creatures that we're seeing, throughout the Northern California wilderness. But these were my favorite because they sort of mix history with legends. Local legends, but also there's some, science fiction stuff and some religion, fable type stuff.
Crime-related stuff.
Crime.
Politics.
Yes.
Kind of everything in this list.
Yes. Although we did, we didn't get into, like, there's a lot of, like, cold case murders that we're not really getting into because you could have a whole podcast on that. The freaking Golden State Killer, just got caught not that far away.
Maybe we'll update this later.
Yeah. But so that's kind of how I wanted to cover sort of the cool stories around, like, a lot of the outdoor areas of Northern California. So should we just hop in the list?
Absolutely. I think this is a great list. Some of the things I knew about, some of the things I had to do some more research about, and that'll probably be the case for most of our listeners. So it's a fun, really well-rounded list for sure.
Some of the stuff we've talked a lot about, and some of the stuff we've never talked about.
Right.
Both on this podcast and on our website, which we've talked about most things on the website. So it's shocking that we have some stuff that we've never discussed, which is going to be exciting.
And the way that we've laid these out, and you've done this, we're laying this out in kind of a top 10. We're gonna get there is number one for a reason. So we're gonna start high and low. Obviously, we're gonna start with 10, end with 1, and we have ranked these based on just your personal opinion, really.
Correct, because I would have number 2, number 1, but let's not get into that. It's not necessarily the order. It's the order I knew the people would want, not necessarily what I think is the funnest. But let's start. Number 10, we got the real-life Zorro here in Northern California. So there's a man named Joaquin Murrieta Carrillo, and I don't know if I pronounced that right, but I apologize if I did. And he came to America from Mexico during the gold rush. He moved to Sonora with his family, with his brothers and sisters and his young wife. They were young. They wanted to strike it rich in the gold rush. So him and his brother were accused of stealing a horse. And in a lot of the research I did, he was wrongfully accused. And so from that, they whipped and hung his brother. Okay. They brutally raped and murdered his wife. This is according to legend. And apparently she died in his arms and he vowed revenge. So again, according to legend, he tracked down all the people that did this to his brother and to his wife and killed them. And just like this brutal, the newspapers were following along as he's hunting down these people and killing them. A whopping $5,000 reward was put on his head, which was a ton of money back then. And apparently, they caught him and killed him. Now, a lot of this is disputed because historical fact back in the 1800s is a little difficult to follow. So a book was written about his life in 1852. It's called The Life and Adventures of Joaquin Murrieta, the Celebrated California Bandit. Now, that book was read, and let me just say, no one knows how factual that, I think the author went off a lot of stories he heard and sort of filled in a lot of the blanks. And that's why a lot of this is legend and not necessarily fact. But that book was read by Johnston McCulley, who used Joaquin Murrieta to frame his fictional book about Don Diego de la Vega, also known as Zorro.
The Masked Man.
The Masked Man. So Zorro actually comes from this bandit who cruised around Northern California gold camps, vowing revenge and killing the people who struck his family. So like I said, there's a lot of controversy around this because the book, no one knows how factual this book is. It's a lot of legend and story, but it's really cool. There's been a ton of documentaries about this guy. And of course, Zorro was turned into a 6-book series, which was then turned into probably a bazillion movies and TV shows and so on and so forth, which I love the Zorro movies.
Totally.
So just a really cool legend. Once again, this is nothing we can actually make fact. He's strictly a story, although we know he existed. There's a lot of historical, stuff that he actually existed, but we don't know exactly what is true and what's not.
It's a really cool story. I mean, if just there's a possibility that Zorro is kind of framed after somebody from Northern California history, I think that's awesome. We grew up, our dad is a huge fan of Zorro. Yep. So we watched a lot of Zorro when we were growing up, and I still love those movies. I mean, is it The Mask of Zorro, the movie?
Yep, with Antonio Banderas.
Such a great movie.
Yep.
I mean, that holds up even to this day.
Yeah.
I might watch that maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. But it's a great story. It's a cool story. I'd never heard of this story. This is one of the stories that I had never heard of that I think is absolutely fascinating. Yeah,
they called him the Robin Hood of El Dorado, I believe.
That I didn't understand.
I don't either, and he wasn't like robbing from the rich and giving to the poor. Although I think for a lot of, probably, poorer Mexican people who had moved to the gold rush and had experienced some sort of racist element from these white settlers who were trying to keep all the gold for themselves, I think he was a little bit of a heroic symbol because he took matters into his own hands, and he said, "No, I'm not letting you do this to me and my family. I'm going to brutally murder all of you guys."
I think Zorro's a much more accurate description of this particular
Correct.
person.
Yep.
But hey, you want to call him Robin Hood? Call him Robin Hood.
Yeah, and we have a couple stories on here from the gold rush, and the gold rush it was just bananas. I mean, it's the Wild West. Everyone, it's kind of like the tech boom, except you can just like shoot people down and take their money.
The Wild West.
And so all the stories we see in all these Westerns kind of come from this gold rush era where there's Chinese people coming in from China to get gold. There's people coming from all over the country, Mexico, all over the world. And there's sort of this melting pot of everyone fighting over the gold that they can find and strike it rich. So it's a really cool time in Northern California. By the way, first gold nugget was found just up the road in the American River. So
gold nugget, local gold. Gotta love it.
yes. So
NorCal's got everything. We got the best wine in the world, the best weed in the world. We got the best gold in the world.
well, yeah. I don't know how much gold is left.
Right. But, I mean, come on.
But from what I hear, there is still a decent amount of gold, like in the Trinity River and Clear Creek, and but it's not stuff you can get rich off anymore, I don't think.
It's a hobby.
Yeah, I agree. So that is number 10 on our list, our first one of the day. What do we got next? What do we got at number 9?
Number 9, this is a cool story that I had known nothing about, and this one is the one that I kind of spent the most time researching because I was the least familiar. The story of the curse of Tenaya Canyon. Now, Tenaya Canyon is in the Yosemite Valley. It is one of the most iconic kind of picturesque canyons in Yosemite Valley. Absolutely beautiful. The name Tenaya Canyon is named after a Awanichi Indian named Chief Tenaya. And that's kind of where this particular curse comes from. Now, the Tenaya Canyon is a canyon that people love to hike through, but is notorious for having just being haunted. There's always negative things that end up happening. And the origin of this kind of curse dates back to Chief Tenaya himself. Now, in the 1850s, now most of the research I did was actually just reading this one article that this guy wrote that I'll give him total credit for. Yosemite's Haunted Canyon by Christopher Earls Brennan. Now, he outlines in this article that in the 1850s, white settlers were just kind of moving into the area, and the Awanichi tribe was living there, and they had a reservation near Fresno, and the white settlers kind of wanted to take over the area, and there was a lot of back and forth, so much so that it turned into physical combat. The 2nd Battalion under Captain John Bowling entered the valley to resume the deportation effort because they were trying to deport them. They didn't agree with that, so it came to blows.
They were trying to move them into a rereservation.
They were trying to move them out of
their
settling.
ancestral land into a reservation. Yeah,
because this was a beautiful area. This canyon, so it ended up turning violent, so much so that this is kind of similar to the last story. Chief Tenaya's favorite son was killed in the battle. And he was literally like a favorite son, which is weird to say, but I guess when you have those those hierarchy kind of higher level families, there is always
maybe
a
it
favorite,
was his first son
the
that
first
could have
in
been
line
chief.
to taking the chief. Exactly. It might not have been the oldest necessarily. It doesn't say. But so after Chief Tenaya's son was killed, he approached this captain and said, and I quote, "Kill me, sir captain. Yes, kill me as you killed my son, as you would kill my people if they were to come to you. You would kill all of my race if you had the power. You have made me sorrow, my life dark. You killed the child of my heart. Why not kill the father? You may kill me, sir captain, but you shall not live in peace. I will follow in your footsteps. I will not leave my home, but be with the spirit among the rocks, the waterfalls, in the rivers, and in the wind. Wherever so you go, I will be with you. You will not see me, but you will fear the spirit of the old chief and grow cold. And that's literally where the curse began. I think that's incredible. The fact there's a quote, I mean, who knows how accurate that is, but it's pretty poetic if you consider it. And that's really where the curse began. Now, the most famous blunder, we'll call it, in that area, based on this quote curse, was from the most famous kind of explorer in that area, Mr. John Muir.
Mr. Muir.
Now, according to his book in the 1918 book, he talks about how when he finally went to explore, he had a fall. It was basically the first time he had really had a hard fall in all of his exploration, which he kind of jokes about in the book. Like, finally it happened.
This is many years and decades of exploration. John Muir spent his entire life in the wilderness.
Absolutely, his entire life. And I mean, there's quotes from the book in this article that talk about the first time since I touched foot in Sierra Rocks, he fell, basically. And where escaping from the gorge after he had fallen had become basically almost impossible to do. So he had to take several months of kind of recuperation after this fall from his exploration in this canyon.
He almost died. And according to what I read, he lost consciousness in the fall, and when he woke, he didn't really remember how he fell. He just woke up and he was like lodged down the hill.
Right. He said he was kind of saved by two bushes. Yeah. Like, had those bushes not been there, he would have plundered to his death. But that's just kind of the most famous blunder that is quote unquote caused from this
today. It's there's so many like accidents and unaccountable deaths in the area that they call it the Bermuda Triangle of Yosemite.
It looks like an amazing hike, though. Like, to go from one end of that valley to the actual like heart of Yosemite, which is basically back in civilization. It looks like great. Obviously, it'd take some time to get there, but that would be a great.
It's journey. Super rugged, but that's search and rescue teams just call that area the Bermuda Triangle because that's where most of their rescue missions have to occur, and so I don't know, you can call it the curse. It's certainly like a coincidence that the most, dangerous area of Yosemite is also very famously cursed, very publicly and famously cursed by the Chief Tenaya. So that's a super cool story.
Pretty cool. Always love Yosemite. I've never been to a lot of this area before. Tuolumne Meadows is fairly close to this area, which I've spent a good amount of time at, but I don't think I've actually spent a lot of time in this valley. So maybe it's somewhere I need to throw on the bucket list to go visit. Tenaya Lake, Creek, Canyon, all of them.
Yeah, I'm kind of good on going to a cursed, I
feel like I got the spirit of Chief Tenaya with me. So like, I feel like I'm good.
Fair enough. No, that's a cool story and
really cool story. Yeah. I did not know about this one. Awanichi tribe. I really spent some time trying to figure out how to say that.
Are we sure you're saying it right?
Awanichis.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah.
Chief Tenaya.
Okay, number 8. I got another haunted story here for you. It's called Bodie, California, and a lot of people probably know this, and some may not. But Bodie, California, is haunted. It was once home to 10,000 people during the gold rush. And following the gold rush boom, everyone bounced and left. And, there's not much to do there in the foothills of the Sierra. Otherwise, there's not many resources other than gold during the time. So back in the 1800s, it was home to 10,000 people during the gold rush. Today, it sits abandoned with all the town intact. And it's protected as the Bodie State Historic Park. So you can go visit it. You can go see all these different homes and barns. And there's actually artifacts from, the people who, they just left their homes intact.
There's
shockingly.
Casino.
Yeah.
Just like abandoned.
There, there's like bars and there's tables with glasses and everything has remained intact. During its boom, Bodie had 2,000 buildings, 65 saloons, multiple newspapers, And of course, a murder a week. Classic Wild West stuff. There's like old pianos there. You can see pool tables, kitchen sets. The thing about it is you're not allowed to take anything, right? It's a state historic park, and they kind of let people go through it somewhat freely, which is what makes it what it is. And so you're not allowed to take anything from the park. And interestingly enough, park rangers began receiving letters from people in the mail saying, I took something from the park and my life has fallen apart. And they get all these letters all the time, and people send the stuff back hoping to reverse the curse of Bodie on them. But a couple letters that they gotten, let's see. Fair warning for anyone that thinks this is just folklore. My life has never seen such turmoil. Please take my warning and do not remove even a speck of dust. And this is, people have said, they'll take shoes, they'll take artifacts, they'll also just take a rock, and they'll get the curse. Another letter said, please find enclosed one weather-beaten old shoe. The shoe was removed from Bodie during the month of August, 1978. My trail of misfortune is so long and depressing, it can't be listed here. So
both of those are basically poetically written.
Right. And there's a ton of these. They released all of these, and actually, when you go into the park, they have all these old artifacts on display with the letters next to them saying, don't take anything. So there's a lot, many letters, and you can see them at the park that sort of gives into this legend, to this curse of Bodie. I'm a little skeptical, not that I'm going to go take anything there by any means, but according to some stories, a park ranger was fed up with people taking stuff from it, so he just started making these up.
Totally, you can totally see where that would come from.
Then the curse kind of just took on a life of its own. So what do you think? You think it's real? You think the curse of Bodie is real?
So I'm not really a big curse guy, but I'm just going to say yes because I kind of believe in karma.
Me too. I was going to say karma's a bitch.
I agree with karma in that, if you're stealing something from a museum, basically, you should have something bad happen to you. Now, I guess for some reason my mind goes to, how long do you think this town can exist?
That's a great question.
They're not restoring anything. I mean, you can see the roof falling in some of these. How long until this is all just kind of decrepit and they completely bulldoze this and just turn it into a subdivision?
I think they...
And then poltergeist, right?
I think that they take seriously trying to keep it open. I mean, certainly it's a big place for visitors, and the state park system gets money from people in, so they have a vested interest in going in and actually... I don't know whether they would actually fix the infrastructure of a house that's, say, falling down.
Well, that takes away from the appeal, doesn't it?
It does, but I'm sure that they could hide it in a way where it wouldn't be... it would still have its lore to it, but... Yeah, no, that's a great point. And by the way, if enough people steal stuff from it, then it's gonna go away. You eventually don't have anything left. But
the fact that we've never done a video there is kind of crazy. Where exactly is it?
Bodie, it's in the Eastern Sierra. Yeah, just north of Mono Lake, in Mammoth area. Yeah. So yeah, it's if it's true that this park ranger made this up, brilliant on his part, absolutely brilliant. And quite frankly, even if I believe that he made it up, I'm not testing it. I'm not testing anything like that. So
it's forward-thinking marketing, honestly.
Yeah. So that's it. The Curse of Bodie, and pretty cool.
Very cool. Very cool. We'll see how long it lasts. Probably it'll outlive us, which is ridiculous. But I mean, at some point, they'd take the whole town, turn it into a museum, like in one building, and then build like a strip mall around it.
It's already 3 times my age. So, or no, 5 times. It's 150 years old, 170. Yeah, it's old. So it's probably going to last another 100 years.
We'll see if they actually put money into, keeping the
Fixing
infrastructure moving forward.
Yeah.
Yes, very cool story. So, okay, let's get to number 7. 7. This is a story that's a little bit more familiar to me, I guess. I think that it's because I'm a big fan of crime movies, mafia movies, all of those kind of ideas.
The Godfather.
Number 7, the frozen bodies at the bottom of Lake Tahoe. Now, this is a great story because, again, from somebody who is a bit of a crime, I don't want to say a buff because I'm not a crime buff at all. I just enjoy watching crime stuff. This is a story that I think is by far the most legitimate of any of the stories that we have here, because there's no doubt in my mind that there are frozen bodies at the bottom of Lake Tahoe from mobsters in the 70s, 60s, late 60s, early 70s,
60s and 70s. Yeah.
So the lake,
swimming with the fishes.
there you go. Lake Tahoe, the second deepest lake in the United States, 1,644 feet to the bottom, which is incredible. And it's known as being a really, really clear lake, but that's just basically this top 60 feet. Once you get below that, it becomes darker and darker. And I mean, imagine a lake being 1,600 feet deep. That's an incredible depth. And so they're saying that it's so cold at those deep depths, and that a lot of these murders occurred in the cold season, the winter months in Lake Tahoe, incredibly cold, more snow than anywhere else in Northern California. I can see how it legitimately can be real that these bodies being so deep down the lake that it's so cold that it preserves them. I don't know if they're going to be frozen solid, but I think that I can't see how there wouldn't be at least some fairly preserved dead bodies at the bottom of Lake Tahoe.
Yeah, the lake's at over 6,000 feet. And if anyone's ever been in there, it's freaking cold lake, even at the very, very surface. So you go all the way down and it nears freezing cold. And like you said, they're probably not frozen solid or whatever, but some sort of preservation would happen. And I don't know how long, and maybe, I don't know. I don't know the science behind this, but it sounds real to me.
I mean, where there is mafia hits, right? It's very clear that there was some mafia presence in Lake Tahoe in that time, especially when, the casinos are kind of up and coming. And I'm sure that there were dead bodies dumped in the lake. If you take a boat out far enough, that body's going to keep plummeting. You get in the middle of the lake, that body's going to go down there and it's going to sit there and preserve for a long time.
The stories of these hits that they would dump people on the lake were so prevalent. It happened in Godfather too.
Right.
They killed Fredo and dumped him in Lake Tahoe. Like, it's so
he's actually fishing in Lake Tahoe and they shoot him in the back of the head.
Correct. Yes.
I watched the scene right before I came.
Yeah. There's also
saying Hail Mary. It was kind of random. He's just chanting Hail Mary and the guy behind him just takes a gun out and shoots him. It's like, did he warn him?
He's doing his rosary first thing in the morning. There's also other theories surrounding this, which I think the mafia connection is the best part, or is the most legitimate part of the story. But there was also a lot of Chinese railroad workers in the area, and according to some legends I've read, the people did not want to pay them, and so they would kill them and dump them in the lake. So, I mean, there could be thousands of dead bodies down there, because these Chinese immigrants the government didn't have any record of them. So it was really easy to just kill them and dump them off, a very, very sad story, obviously. But I think there's, as you're developing it in Lake Tahoe in the 1800s, late 1800s, in the Wild West, which we've talked about a lot, I could see a lot of scenarios where people are dumping other people in the lake. Also, what I like to think is the hermit of Emerald Bay, who lived on the island of Emerald Bay for 25 years, died on the lake in a crash. I like to think he's down there just chilling, totally preserved.
Well, and just to kind of put the bow on the mafia story in the Lake Tahoe area, Frank Sinatra used to own the Cal Neva.
Yep.
Cal Neva, shout out, when I was, 14 years old, threw a quarter and won $40. I spent all of it at Toys R Us on baseball cards. Shout out. But
you brought it home in a bucket of
all
quarters.
Yeah. It was crazy. I kept counting it right next to you all the car ride home, just rubbing it in your face that I won $40 and you didn't. But rumor is that underneath the Cal Neva Hotel, there are tunnels that were built so that JFK and Marilyn Monroe could meet up and or sneak Frank Sinatra out or have, any of these mafia tie meetings. That's rumor.
No, they're not rumors. I've seen videos and pictures of said tunnels.
Well, I have not, so you will state that. But I mean, that's just putting the bow on.
I will state that.
That's putting the ribbon, the bow on this story, because I mean, the most famous kind of mafia relationship, we'll call it, happened in this kind of same area.
Yeah, the 60s and 70s, and maybe we have some listeners or some readers on our website that can put more context to this. Apparently, there were just mob hits all the time in South Lake. I mean, the owner of Bill's Casino, rest in peace, Bill's Casino, great casino in South Lake Tahoe. He was killed in a car bomb, and that classic mob hit, right?
Totally.
So it's there. All these stories. It makes a ton of sense. Now the question is, how are these bodies? Are they actually decomposing at the bottom of the lake? But we know for sure that there's probably a lot in there.
So. You need to get a submarine down there.
Well, I mean, and this, we actually have another story about something in Lake Tahoe coming up, but Jacques Cousteau had the famous quote when he did a deep water dive in Lake Tahoe, and he said, what did he say? He said, "The world isn't ready for what was down there." Which there's rumors that quote wasn't true.
Still, it adds to the it's a cool story. Lake Tahoe is kind of mysterious, but that way.
Correct. Yes. All right. Next up, let's move on to our first legend of Mount Shasta. These are, I would say, these Mount Shasta legends are I'm kind of I know a lot about these.
You're a Mount Shasta buff.
I'm a Mount Shasta legend buff. So the first one is Saint Germain on Mount Shasta. And so Saint Germain, if you've never heard of him, he is a legendary spiritual, quote unquote, master of the ancient wisdom. And he's been quoted a lot in some religious teachings. A gentleman by the name of Guy Ballard, he lived on the base of Mount Shasta in 1930, and he used to hike up the mountain all the time. And he claimed in 1930 to have multiple encounters with this spiritual being Saint Germain. And throughout his encounters, Saint Germain would basically teach him these ancient wisdoms, and so much so that Ballard wrote a series of 20 books about the encounters. And he described him as like this ascended master, which I don't know exactly what that means, but it's kind of like Jesus. He's trying to assist humanity, quote unquote. So the third book contains material that was used for the scriptures of what is now the I Am movement, which is basically a religious movement in Mount Shasta.
Which we're familiar with.
We are very familiar with. The I-Amers, they call them, and they have a whole facility there in Mount Shasta, and it is it's an interesting story. There's actually a lot of historical stories, both before and after Guy Ballard, of people coming across this Saint Germain, and so one could deduce that Ballard saw these other visions of Saint Germain and used it to write this book series and create this movement, in which I'm sure it was a financial profit. It was a very profitable venture for him. So today, I mean, there's like a million people in the I am movement. It's a big movement.
Legend turned to full on movement.
Yes, there are a lot of words.
People live in this.
Yeah,
in this world, the world that this was started by, this Saint Germain was started by, kind of.
Right. And I mean, there's been a lot of books about Saint Germain and the stories on Mount Shasta. Obviously, we could never prove if any of this happened. Sounds like a classic. Hey guys, I saw this thing up on the mountain. Buy my book type of thing. But nonetheless, it's still a huge movement in Mount Shasta, and people can do whatever they want. They can believe whatever they want, and it is a cool story. And I've never read any of these 20 books from Ballard, but it is a full-on religious movement in Mount Shasta today, based on these visions from Saint Germain.
And Mount Shasta, I didn't really realize this growing up, is a really spiritual place. Like every other shop is like a rock shop, crystal shop.
Nowadays it is, yeah.
And I didn't really realize that when I was a kid. And a lot of that stuff started with Saint Germain, and kind of the origin. I mean, there's other things that bring spirituality to the area, but this is a big part of it.
The Native Americans obviously thought of Mount Shasta as the ultimate spiritual, destination. We talked with Andrew Oser over there in Mount Shasta. He does these spiritual guided tours on the mountain, and he said there's absolutely areas where you can feel something, right?
You did a full-on meditation session.
I did a full-on meditation.
Feel spiritual?
It was nice. It was nice. I don't know. I felt something. There's something about being in nature and experiencing that. And sometimes the increased elevation helps you feel a little, high or whatever. But
you were being forced to meditate on video.
I was not being forced. I wanted to.
Basically what I'm trying to say, giving you an out, because I was sitting there filming the whole time, moving back and forth to 2 different cameras, checking the audio level, and you're listening to him. So it probably wasn't as spiritual of an experience for you as it could have been.
No, I actually enjoyed it quite a bit. And I like Andrew. I like, and they talk a lot about just these different feelings you can get. And he said it's for any religion, you can just really, feel the mountain and feel nature when you're out there, and use it to meditate and clear your mind and find this healing power within meditation. Which the I am movement is something I would think a little bit different, where you actually have these different beliefs and sacred scriptures and stories from this guy in 1930. So,
fascinating stuff.
Yes, and that's our first story about a being on Mount Shasta.
Great story. I look forward to the next. The next story for me, number 5. I alluded to this kind of a little bit earlier, but this is a much more specific story. We're talking about the legend of JFK and Marilyn Monroe in Northern California. Now, I alluded to it earlier, how potentially there were rumors that these underground tunnels that you verified from your journalistic background.
I've seen photos.
And those are rumors. There's no actual, this happened on this day kind of stories. But there is a story that is a story of legend from the 1960s, where 3 individuals encountered themselves, Marilyn Monroe, in a bar waiting for JFK. Now, the story goes back in 1962, a guy by the name of Mike Padula owned a bar called Mike's Place in Castella, California. Now, Castella is very close to Mount Shasta. It's kind of a small little town.
It sits under Castle Craig's right along the Sacramento River, yeah. Beautiful little town.
Beautiful, very, very small town.
Not
a town you would expect to see a celebrity.
100 people maybe.
But back in the 60s, it was kind of, turns out it was kind of a getaway area for famous people. because it's beautiful. Why not? I mean, it's a beautiful area to visit. And famously, Mike tells a story about him and 2 patrons in the bar one day encountered Marilyn Monroe, who came in and just hung out with them for 3 hours. Now, I can only imagine. Now, I mean, first of all, probably known as the most beautiful woman in existence at that particular time, walks into a bar, literally walks into a bar by herself. Like, if that happened today, like, imagine how many people would be text messaging. You can't text message 1962. So it was just like, we're just going to hang out here at the bar. I planned on going home, but now I'm not. So she hung out with these patrons for about 3 hours, story goes. And then at some point, somebody handed Mike, the bartender, a note that says, quote, car here at noon for you and Jay.
I believe the way I had read that is he was given that before she came in. So someone came into the bar, gave him this note. He's like, "What the hell is this?" And yeah, said to give it to her.
That was unclear to me.
Yeah,
so
it's unclear. It's unclear. I think altogether. I think there's a lot of gray area in.
Well, I mean, we're talking about legends here. So
right.
She got the message, and then sure enough, a limousine pulled up to this bar. Again, if you've ever been to Castella, there's probably no limos in Castella. So seeing one pull up to a bar is something that, you're not going to forget. Famously, President John F. Kennedy was in this limousine, picked up Marilyn Monroe. They went to a local cottage, I believe, what was it? Castlestone Cottage Inn, and stayed there for 2 days. And by all accounts, pretty open that it was them. I mean, it's, again, back in the pre-social media days where they didn't have to worry about paparazzi coming and finding out where they were because they posted something on Instagram. They were just kind of hanging out and hanging out with the locals in that little cottage area. So that is a specific occasion where a rendezvous, quote unquote, occurred here in Northern California. We mentioned the one in Tahoe. This was in Castella. Either way, the legend of the romance between Marilyn Monroe and President JFK is very much tied to Northern California.
Yeah, so JFK famously went on a tour of Northern California. He went to Lassen Volcanic National Park, and then he dedicated the Whiskeytown Bridge in Redding in 1963, and this was weeks before he was assassinated. It was the very end of his life. So it is odd that this happened in 1962. It's weird that he's in that area multiple times in multiple years, although not unfounded.
He must have just liked the area, right? He must have just had this love for maybe why? They could go anywhere in the country. One of them is probably choosing that area, right?
Yeah, my guess is Monroe lived in Hollywood, so maybe this was a way for
10
them
hours away.
For her to head up north a little bit, and he would meet her up there. I can see how this could be a very true story, and I could see how this could be used by some local business owners to drive traffic, right? So
I believe this. I believe it 100%.
I think it sounds like a true story. So this bar is no longer in service, and apparently during the story she wrote her name in lipstick on the wall or whatever. So we can't verify that. There was also the owner of the of this hotel found a picture of them in the dresser, right?
I think 2 pictures.
Two pictures. Mm-hmm. But the pictures are no longer around. We can't find them anywhere. And this person no longer owns the place.
Pretty much everyone involved in the story is dead.
Correct. But this was, this was a very public story that they had. And still to this day, you can rent that very cottage out where they stayed. And they say this is the Marilyn Monroe JFK. So that could be a marketing tactic.
I wish they still had the bar. We'd go visit Mike's place and go back to the cottage. That's a video.
Right. But there were newspaper articles talking about this. So, and it was just a local newspaper just getting quotes from these people at a bar.
They could. It is funny to think about just 3 guys sitting at a bar drinking and be like, what if we just made up this story that Marilyn Monroe hung out with us all day? Who would say otherwise?
That would be pretty cool, though, right? I mean, that would be pretty freaking cool. All these witnesses have passed away, so we can't verify. There's no way to verify the story, but it is this cool little story in Castella. That Castella is known for two things: fishing and Castle Craigs. And now it's known for three things. Also, the place JFK and Marilyn Monroe's love, But
we should say also that he famously was cheating on his wife during this.
Correct.
I mean,
can you imagine if
we
that
do
happened
we do
today?
kind of glamorize this relationship that was very much adultery.
I think it goes back to a time when you could get away with this stuff. Like, not that that's a good thing, but like, I don't know. It's now
That's just the woke me just speaking,
Yeah, nowadays you're like, as soon as you see her, everyone's got their phone up, and they're taking pictures of her, and so yes, obviously it's a bad thing to cheat on your wife, especially when you're president of the United States and you probably have better things to do. But a very cool story. You can actually Google this, and you can go stay at this cottage. It's there. This is where they said. I don't know if they actually. Yeah, it's
cabin
number three.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, but I've never seen the actual photo. They said they found this photo. I've never seen it. And by the way, this was like this place, this hotel was bought by a new owner, and then he found it.
Right.
So it seems a little convenient, but it makes sense that they're cruising around to small towns in America.
If you're gonna cruise around anywhere, why not pick the most beautiful place in the country?
Very true. And this also goes to the Tahoe stories where
does tie them together. There was both. These guys are rendezvousing all over NorCal.
Yeah, I mean they're like, hey, Frank Sinatra, we're gonna be at the Cal Neva. Don't let anyone see us. Can we use your tunnels? He's like, yeah,
Frankie,
go for it, baby.
I got some adultery to do. You got a room for me?
Yeah, go for it, baby. Yeah. So yes, some famous sightings here in NorCal. Okay, we got the next one's a big one, and we got a few stories. So number 4, we have legends of buried treasure in Northern California, and quite frankly, there's a lot of these. And so I picked 3 stories that I thought were really cool, and they're actually mostly in like the Redding area. But here's a setup to these stories. In 2013, a couple that we don't know exactly where they live, but it's somewhere south of Tahoe in the Sierras, somewhere not very far of Tahoe in the Sierras. They bought this new house, and they were walking around, and they found this can hanging from a tree, this old-timey can, and it looked as something was going on below it. They dug up some old coins. This was in their backyard. They eventually sold those coins for $10 million. They found in their backyard, they found $10 million worth of buried treasure. So that it was known as the Saddle Ridge Hoard, and the names of the people have not been released. The location has not been released, but it sits today as the largest discovery of buried gold coins ever to be recovered in the United States. Now, that makes a ton of sense considering where we live. We live in Northern California, home of the gold rush, right? So there's a ton of legends of these hidden gold encounters. For a couple, people would bury their gold for a couple reasons. One is they robbed a stagecoach and they would hide it. So if they get caught, they could go back and get it later. 2, a lot of people just didn't trust the banks back then.
Still today. I know people that bury money literally today. I swear to God, I am not lying about it. I have a friend of mine who famously buries money.
So, and that's what they think this gold that they found, they think this was someone's life savings. They buried it, died, unexpectedly or something, and it was just never recovered. So, so here are a couple stories of lost treasure, and this is just a small sample size. Rattlesnake Dick, famed stagecoach robber Rattlesnake Dick and his crew stole $25,000 from a Wells Fargo stagecoach in 1856 on the Siskiyou Trail. The Siskiyou Trail comes down through Oregon, past Mount Shasta, very famed trail for Wells Fargo stagecoaches. They they split up the gold and buried it throughout the Trinity Alps. And when they were caught, they told the authorities where it was. Authorities only found $15,000. So the rest of the loot today would be worth $300,000, sitting up somewhere in the Trinity.
That's it? Only $300,000? That's like a
for $10,000
nugget.
$10,000. I'd take $300,000.
Well,
yeah,
I mean,
another story: the Ruggles brothers. Have you heard of the Ruggles brothers?
sounds familiar.
They're a big part of Redding history. So in 1892, they stole only $5,000 from a stagecoach in Weaverville. And they were captured pretty quickly. And they said they hid the loot in this area about 6 miles west of Redding. So I'm guessing, like, you know, just on the other side of Whiskey Town, somewhere around there. Authorities found the bag, but nothing was in it. So the loot is out. It's hidden. We don't know. Someone might have picked it up. We just don't know. So this is where the story gets interesting. Apparently, women loved these brothers so much. They were so handsome and charming that they would go to the prison or the jail in Redding, and they'd bring them flowers, and there was like this huge fanfare for these guys that were in jail there. And the men in Redding were so fed up that 40 men, they stormed the jail, they pulled them out, and they hung them from the train trestle there in Caldwell Park in Redding.
They hung him for being too handsome. It's something that I can relate to.
They legit, I mean, they were legitimate stagecoach robbers. This was not their first,
And don't anyone get any ideas that the O'Brien brothers also need to hang because we're too good looking.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. So yes, their treasure was never found. Although one of the Ruggles brothers was actually on the run for another month after his brother. So you could think like he probably snuck back, grabbed the gold, and moved it somewhere else. Well, I don't know how you spent $5,000 back then in that amount of time. But who knows?
So for me, anytime you say, like, you see they found the bag but no treasure, it's like, well, yeah, he's probably not hoarding, he's probably not burying, he's probably going to brothels and bars and just spending it.
But like the rest of his crew, well, they had a whole crew, so someone went back and got it. So you would assume, I don't know.
Lost treasure could be spent treasure.
Correct. There's also why am I blanking on his name? The Black Bart. Black Bart was a huge robber of the Siskiyou Trail, and he used to hide his loot over by Hedge Creek Falls. So there's probably a bunch of treasure up there somewhere.
I wonder how they would personally mark their treasure so they remembered where.
Well,
that's
that's what's interesting about that story of the can hanging from the tree. It's like just a little marker, but
it's so clearly man-made that even if anybody sees it, you need to make a marking that
you can't take a picture on your iPhone,
right? But it looks natural enough to have naturally occurred, and as opposed to a can hanging,
But you remember these places are so remote back then that
that's true.
No one's just stumbling upon these things and being like, oh, let me dig. So third and last one, again, this is just a little drop of all the lost treasure that is apparently out here in NorCal. The Mormon gold of Clear Creek, California. So Clear Creek is that, beautiful river that goes out from Whiskey Town and flows through Redding. And a group of Mormons were passing through the Redding area in the 1850s with a bunch of gold that they had mined. And when they got to Clear Creek, it was just raging with water. And anyone that knows Clear Creek, it's deep. It's not like the widest river, but it's super deep. So it's really hard to cross, actually. So they waited a few days, and the water never died down, and they couldn't just stay there. So they attempted to cross their wagon through the most shallow place they could find. The wagon, the wheel fell down into a hole. It tipped over, and everything went downstream. Now, in 1910, just 60 years later, a prospector found a single gold coin with the Mormon group's initial on it. It's the only thing that's ever been found in Clear Creek. So there's this whole treasure sitting at the bottom of Clear Creek somewhere. I think that's kind of a cool story.
I think it's super cool.
Yeah. Because I think that's realistic, especially like anyone that knows Clear Creek, there's like these little caves down there. It's very hard to...
It's rugged terrain.
It's rugged water. What's funny is our father, Chip O'Brien, he used to actually snorkel Clear Creek for cow trout. He used to do fish counts in there. So I'm shocked he hasn't seen it. But
seen any gold?
Yeah, well,
well, I'm sure he's.
I think he's the only person that snorkels Clear Creek, right?
People do weird things all the time.
Yeah, but not as many as you think. But anyway, those are my stories. There's a ton of lost treasure stories in NorCal. So, if you want to find some, Google them, because I literally found 25 and I just wanted to pick a few out. But those are different legends.
Yeah, that's a really cool story. The Mormon treasure specifically, I'd never heard of. So next time we interview Pops on the pod, we'll have to ask him if he's seen any gold.
That being said, a lot of people have panned for gold in Clear Creek since then, so it might be unfindable.
Actual gold coins with Mormon symbol on it.
Correct.
But maybe our father has. Who knows? Okay, let's get to the next number 3 story. Tahoe Tessie. So you've heard of the Loch Ness Monster, the monster coming out of the Loch Ness, what is it, a lake, I guess? Lake Loch Ness?
Yeah, the Loch Ness Monster,
in Scotland, is it, or Wales, wherever it is. You've heard of the Loch Ness Monster. Mm-hmm. This Tahoe Tessie is Lake Tahoe's version. Now, you might say, well, did they just copy this story from the Loch Ness area? I mean, it's a very similar story. It is a big body of water, and there's a creature very similar in features coming out of this lake. But it's a completely different story. Now, There are several sightings of this, and you wrote a great article on ActiveNorCal.com, and you kind of bullet point where that kind of started. Now, it did start in... it was tribal in origin. There were some tribal stories from the local tribes about seeing this creature in the lake. Okay, so it kind of started there, but then the actual written historical sightings, we'll call it, started in the 1950s. 2 off-duty police officers claimed to see a large black hump emerge from the water and kept speeding by their boat, which was going 60 miles an hour. So that was the first one. Next one, again in 1950s. 2 divers reported finding an underwater cave, and a creature shot out of that cave, leaving silt and stirred about in the water, so they weren't able to see. But when they went back, there were 2 really large fin prints that were indented. So that was kind of the second, we'll call it, sighting. Next one, sometime in the late 1990s, so about 40 years later, a kayaking instructor reported seeing a glimpse of what looked like a green 2-person kayak flipped over and then just immediately sank. So he went up and approached the area in his boat, and there were no traces of a kayak anywhere. It literally disappeared, and so that was... In his opinion, that was a sighting. He then, the fact that he saw this kayak-looking thing and it disappeared faster than an actual kayak would sink made him personally believe that that's what he saw. So that was the next sighting. Next sighting in 2004, an off-duty bartender. I love how it says that. An off-duty bartender. I'm an off-duty bartender. On the Tahoe Queen, took a picture of a black hump in the water, which he claims is the top of the creature's head. And the last sighting that I have listed here, in 2006, a family vacationing near Tahoe sighted a large, black, scaly-looking creature similar in appearance to a sturgeon with an upturned white nose. However, the creature moved up and down like a mammal instead of side to side like a reptile. So, Tahoe Tessie.
It makes sense that there'd be a giant creature sitting so deep down there, right? Like it's such a deep lake that we really don't know what's going on down there, and so it makes sense. Now, it's easy to just blow this off as just like these different, it's just like the Loch Ness Monster. You believe it or not, there's a lot of fabricated photos out there which kind of ruin it, but
because they're so bad.
Because they're bad.
Right.
They're legit bad.
So, put some effort in. If you're going to doctor something up, put some effort in.
I have looked so far and wide for pictures of Tahoe Tessie online, and they're all terrible.
Yeah.
But
it's comical how bad they are.
There are, there were stories in the San Francisco Examiner with multiple legit people. Like, there was a politician, there were police officers, there were 10 employees of the Tahoe City Post Office. They all saw this thing. So that's what brings credence to it, right? Not only that, but the Native Americans they knew of something going on in there, right? And they were there for thousands of years. So, maybe this was some sort of ancient, whatever being that has just been down there for a long time, and maybe it's going extinct or whatever. But Tahoe's 3.5 million years old. So it makes sense there's some sort of crazy creature that's evolved down there.
There's a SF Gate article that I read, and they talk about how, they brought an expert in because they're like, well, could this potentially be a dinosaur? It's a really deep lake. Could like dinosaurs have existed? And the guy was quickly reminded, well, dinosaurs were extinct 65 million years ago.
Yeah.
So like this would kind of be the only one, and you can't really have a species continue with having only one, And so I would love to believe this, but again, it's legend.
So they also researchers from UC Davis said someone could have put sturgeon in there, right? They said and because it's so big and sturgeon grow to be
30 feet,
1,000 pounds, that it could have been a sturgeon. Someone could have people just bring fish to lakes like randomly, it's so funny. I was up in Fall River Mills last week, and some guy told me how he planted a bunch of fish in Hat Creek. I'm like, you're an asshole. Anyway,
it's weird.
But I mean, a lot of people examine this. A lot of actual researchers from colleges have done a lot of research on this, and it's also become sort of a fun story surrounding the lake. They have a lot of marketing.
Like they need anymore, if I'm honest.
True, but it's fun for the kids. There was this kids book, I think in the 80s, that it sold 10 million copies. So it's a fun little kid's story that you can go to a store in Tahoe. You can see the lake. You can buy your kid a little doll, a Tahoe Tessie doll.
Come to Lake Tahoe, see the dead bodies and the monsters at the bottom of the lake.
Yeah, but this is once again the Costo quote. You guys don't know what's down there, and it's like, okay, well, tell us please, because we would really like to know. But yeah, it's a lot of people just think it's probably this sturgeon that someone put into the lake, and it just grew to massive proportions like we see on Shasta Lake. And Shasta Lake's not even close to the depth of Lake Tahoe, which sturgeon sit at the bottom and eat for over 100 years.
I wonder what it would look like to see that area, like Lake Tahoe, empty. Just to see what the landscape at the bottom looks like. That's fascinating to me. It's so deep, and it feels like it's not big enough to be that deep. And so it's just this big sinkhole looking thing. And it just, for me, it just is fascinating.
Well, it's not a perfect circle, but you can see from one side to the other. That's why it's cool. But it's also, so when I think of Lake Tahoe, I don't think of this massive lake like Shasta Lake, where, it can take you 30 minutes to drive from one side to the other. It's huge. Although I guess it takes you an hour to drive around Lake Tahoe. But you could see from one side to the other, so it doesn't seem that big, but it is big, and it's just super deep. It's a super unique lake, especially considering it's, these natural lakes just aren't found very often in California. Most of them are from dams.
Well, and it started as a hole. Right? And this water accumulates in this hole. So where'd the hole come from?
Oh, there's a million legends about that. How there's a hidden creek at the bottom of the lake, and there's all this stuff. But it's fascinating, and not to get too far into this, but there's literally filters on both sides of the lake, both in it and out of it, that make it so clear. The marshes on the sides of Lake Tahoe just make it super clear.
Natural filters.
It's just a super unique lake, and you know, I do think when you're if you actually believe that there's some sort of creature in there, it does make sense that someone put a sturgeon in there. It grew to 2,000 pounds. You know, and,
that's totally feasible.
Yeah,
1,000%.
And there were all these sightings in the 80s, and then it died. Right? Totally. And then it died, and it was the only one in there, and we know it can't spawn or anything, so it just sits there and grows fat and happy until it dies.
My favorite fact about sturgeon is that that's where caviar comes from.
Yeah,
as I've mentioned on this podcast,
we could have talked about sturgeon in Lake Shasta, but it's not a legend.
Didn't make top 10.
It's not a legend.
Didn't make top 10.
It's not a legend, Bob. It is factual. It is fact.
You have we have pictures of massive, but is there a 30-foot one? Because that's what the legend is. 30-foot sturgeon.
I've never seen a picture of it. No, there's
a big one, but I don't know if it's 30 feet.
The Shasta Dam Museum has a picture of a monstrous one, like caught in the 70s. Which is crazy because the longer they last, the bigger they get, right? Like they're just getting faster and fatter and fatter. So, but no, a 600-pounder was caught there last summer. I'm sure we'll see another one this summer. And they were just locked when they built the dam. They were locked there, and now they just grow fat until they die. So, super unique, but that's what I think it probably is. Although it could be some ancient creature, who knows?
We veered off of Tahoe Tessie. Let's get back to the list. What's number 2?
Number 2. So if you were to Google Lemurians, Mount Shasta, the first 2 articles on Google are articles I've written.
I think a better way of putting that is if you Google aliens in Mount Shasta, the first thing that comes up is Lemurians.
Lemurians, but I
because if you're Googling Lemurians, you already know about the story. But if you Google aliens in Mount Shasta, you're asking about Lemurians.
Well, what's funny is this article I wrote about Lemurians, and Lemurians are, and I'll get into the whole this article I wrote about Lemurians, whatever it was, a few years ago, is now day in and day out the most popular article on our website, because if you Google Lemurians, I'm the first person that comes up.
You're the expert.
And and people email me all the time. People send me all the stuff about Lemurians, and it's been like this cool journey as we hop up the Google ranking, because there's really not like a ton of third-party people talking about, like, there's a lot of people that are really into Lemurians who write about it, but
there's going to be a documentary made about Lemurians, and you're going to be on there as the Lemurian expert.
And I was going to get to this later, but a movie was just made about Lemurians in Mount Shasta, and it is a next level awful. It is next level terrible, and we'll talk about that on another podcast, but Lemurians. So here's the story of Lemurians. Lemuria is basically this ancient civilization that lived, around the same time as Atlantis. And according to this book, it's this book by Frederick Spencer Oliver called A Dweller on Two Planets, written in 1899. He claimed that survivors from a sunken continent called Lemuria, where they sunk into the planet, whatever, hundreds of thousands of years ago, and emerged in Mount Shasta. So in this book is a huge part of the lore of Lemurians. They live in a series of complex tunnels beneath the mountain, and they wear like these white robes, and they live in like this city of gold. There's like a city of gold in the mountain, right? So there's been a ton of quote unquote witness accounts of these mysterious beings. And by the way, I've read some people call them like lizard people. I've seen the most prevalent is they're kind of these tall human looking beings that wear these robes, and they communicate telepathically. So in 1904, British prospector J.C. Brown claimed he found a underground city 11 miles deep in the mountain. And it was full of gold and mummies and shields, and all these people were 10 feet tall. Then Guy Ballard came and he saw Saint Germain, which we talked about earlier, and a lot of people thought he wasn't seeing this being, he was seeing a Lemurian. So the subsequent witness accounts have been, incorporated into numerous like occult religions, like people that, and by the way, probably over 100 books have been written about this Lemuria stuff. So it is fascinating. There's a lot of different, with all the literature on Lemurians, there's a lot of different stories about them, and sometimes they are conflicting. But
that's crazy.
But basically, these are highly civilized humans of some sort of human nature, and they live underground, and they come up every once in a while, and that's when people see them, although no one's seen them for 100 years or whatever. And this also goes to the crystals. The crystal, when you go to Mount Shasta, you're going to see a million crystal shops, and crystals are sort of a part. Lemurians use crystals as a communication tool. So you'll hear all these stories. We've heard a lot of these stories where you hold crystals and it sort of gives you like this jolt or this buzzing feeling, and they think that that's Lemurians not only communicating but having healing powers. So that's it. I mean, I could probably go on forever about this.
So here's an off-the-cuff question.
Sure.
Lemurians they supposedly live in tunnels underneath Mount Shasta. Do you think they loaned those tunnels to Marilyn Monroe and JFK?
Okay, fair enough. No, it's so the story of this guy who went 11 miles into Mount Shasta, like, wouldn't that be super hard?
Right. Well, when I first read it, for some reason my mind went to, because these are known as kind of underground aliens, if you will. When it said 11 miles deep, I'm thinking he was went down 11 miles. But no, because how the hell could you go down 11 miles into the earth, especially as a prospector in 19? But you're saying he hiked in 11 miles. That's not that big.
Or climbed or whatever.
Doable.
I've never read his, I mean, he was so into this that he brought a team of 80 people to explore the mountain. But as soon
how much of an investment was that?
So he gathered up 80 people to go search for this hole, and when all the people got up in the morning and met at the spot, he disappeared. J.C. Brown was never seen again. Now, was he abducted by Lemurians, and because they don't want him to give away their secrets, or was he full of shit? And
or was he a Lemurian and then just went back down under?
Possibly.
He was a Lemurian in disguise.
But it is fascinating to think that there's Lemuria was like this competing civilization with Atlantis, right? And they were highly civilized, and Atlantis, went extinct because they stayed above ground, probably through the Ice Age, and Lemuria stayed underground and were able to flourish, apparently. But yeah, I mean, so there's like 1 million of these people living in Mount Shasta. How easy could you fit 1 million people in Mount Shasta?
Inside the mountain, you're saying? I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So I read or I heard a debate about how you can technically fit all of the people living on Earth in like the 6 boroughs of New York City, like fit them physically.
Oh,
and so. Yeah, 1 million people could probably fit in Mount Shasta. It's a pretty big mountain.
Yeah, I guess you're right. They are 10 feet tall, so they do take up a lot of space. But
I picture them as being skinny. So what they take up in height, they make up for in.
Yes, and I also found this cool little tidbit about Lemurians from LemurianConnection.com.
Of course.
Which somehow we rank higher on Google when you Google Lemurians.
We need to find out who writes that, and we need to have them on the pod.
So apparently, Lemurians and Atlanteans had this like core belief system that was against each other. One, Atlanteans wanted all humans to evolve at a certain rate, and other Lemurians wanted people to evolve at a different rate. And this ideology resulted in a thermonuclear war, which weakened the continental plates, and that's how the Lemuria was able to go underground, because of the continental plates.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, you haven't touched on the clouds surrounding Mount Shasta and kind of the allure that make the Lemurians have something to do with that.
Well, yeah. So lenticular clouds are these disc-like clouds that float,
kind of UFO-shaped
clouds that come over Mount Shasta, and quite frankly, it's one of the best places to see lenticular clouds on the planet. I mean, there's only a few that consistently give like huge lenticular clouds, and Mount Shasta is one of them. Now, because that they look like alien flying saucer discs, and they will come over the mountain and they'll just hover over it for hours, days sometimes. The thought is they're bringing their spaceship over the mountain, going down into their city, and then the cloud disappears.
Yeah, right? I feel like you can't talk about the story of Lemurians and not mention the lenticular clouds.
Well, so that assumes that, one, Lemurians have these flying saucer type.
And didn't emerge under Mount Shasta from a body of land that went underneath another body of land.
Right. So that, yeah, and look, and some people believe that these Lemurians aren't from an ancient society, but rather aliens themselves that live in the mountain and conduct whatever the hell they
highly debated content.
Yes. What's interesting about the Lemurian concept is that the belief is that they warred with Atlantis because Atlantis wanted to change everything when Lemuria wanted to just leave everyone alone. So it does make sense that they would sit in their mountain and just be like, oh, these humans that are just living all around us, we'll just leave them alone, So there's a lot of like weird literature about this that I've clearly read way too much about. But I have been on this weird Lemurian journey as of the last few years because of these articles I've written on our website, and now I'm constantly being contacted by Lemurian enthusiasts, and I think it's just a super cool story, and I enjoy it. And whether you believe it or not, I'm not going to judge you, because I just think it's a super cool story.
I love the story of the Lemurians. Every time we go up to Mount Shasta, there's always some kind of an inside joke that you and I have with regards to Lemurians. And so it's a great story. It definitely meets the number 2 ranking on this list.
Yes, and this is what I mentioned earlier in the podcast. This was probably my number 1 because I'm so passionate. I'm personally passionate about it, but it does not meet the lore of our number 1
There is
overall.
a clear number 1. When this top 10 was created, there is only one. The legend of Bigfoot in Northern California. Mr. NorCal himself, the most widely known legend in Northern California history. Where do we even begin with this one?
Well, so we actually just did an entire podcast a month ago.
But that was on one documentary.
But that
documentary talks about a lot of
Bigfoot
everything.
and cannabis in Humboldt County, and we went pretty deep on this legend. But Northern California has the most Bigfoot sightings in the entire planet to date. So,
well, it's unargued. You can argue that. No, there is no argument. No, Bigfoot is from Northern California. If you believe in Bigfoot, Bigfoot is living in Northern California. There isn't an area of the country that has even a debate to have. If Bigfoot exists in Northern California.
Right.
Now, you can speculate all you want. We went into our own personal opinions, and you can go back and listen to that podcast. But again, there was an only clear number one on this list for local Northern California legends. Absolutely Bigfoot.
Well, so the legend of Bigfoot in Northern California starts with the most famous Bigfoot video to date, and that's the Roger Patterson video. The Roger Patterson video is, and if you saw it, And by the way, if you're watching this on video, we're going to put it right here because we can. But it was on Highway 299 in Humboldt, the small town of Willow Creek, and these guys took this infamous video of a Bigfoot just walking through the wilderness, right? No one has been able to identify the authenticity of the footage. It is, it's one of the best footage it is the best footage you'll see, and because it was filmed in 1967, that you can't really, you can't deny, like you can't say it was or was not real. Like today, I think we can easily deconstruct videos and say like, oh, that's fake, but you can't back then. So this documentary we just watched about Sasquatch. It's called Sasquatch on Hulu. It's about a Bigfoot murder in Humboldt or in the Emerald Triangle. The guy said he was in the Bigfoot suit. He said it's fake.
The guy that, well, from his account, is Bigfoot in that video.
Right.
He
was holding the head.
He's like, this is what I was wearing.
Yeah.
This is it. This is the head. He's like, I was wearing jeans. He's like, if you look close enough, you can see my wallet in the back pocket.
And he's true. There's a bump on the butt, and it looks like a wallet.
But Roger Patterson himself says, no, that's not the case. And they live right down the street from one another. They talk about it in the documentary.
Hilarious.
And we don't want to, we already talked about this in the last pod, but I tend to believe the guy with the head and said, hey, this is me.
Because the man who shot the film has a lot of reasons to lie about it. Mostly, I would believe
credibility-wise,
and financially. But this footage in Willow Creek, and now there is now a museum there, the Bigfoot Museum, and there's all sorts of statues all over Willow Creek of Bigfoot. It's the home of Bigfoot, right? This footage is like single-handedly keeping the Bigfoot movement going. Like it is the most quote unquote credible source. It's like the best video that's ever been created of Bigfoot. And so I read some stuff about it. Like if it weren't for this video, like Bigfoot stuff probably would have dropped off significantly. But this video is the biggest evidence that they have of the gentle giant.
Now that we got some pull because we got a podcast now, I wonder if we reached out to Roger Patterson if he'd give us an interview.
Maybe they probably had to pay him. For Sasquatch, they probably had to pay him a pretty penny, I would think.
Well, say jump on a Zoom.
We need some of that Hulu money.
Shout out sponsors.
There's the California Route 96 is the Bigfoot Scenic Highway is called. There's an upper wilderness trail which goes through all these wilderness areas in Northern California. It's called the Bigfoot Trail.
There have been a lot, and when I say a lot, there have been a lot of sightings. There have been, 25 in Shasta County, 31 in Siskiyou County, 21 in Trinity County, and 42 in Humboldt County. A lot of Bigfoot sightings over the years.
Also, another really popular Bigfoot video is one that was taken in the Marble Mountain Wilderness, which is like up in the Siskiyou County area. So yeah, it's there's videos from here. There's different evidence. We have a museum. It is the prominent legend of Northern California, and for a good reason. There's just a lot of different sightings. So
I didn't know, and you wrote about this on the article. I didn't know that originally when they first started to kind of discover this being, they called it Wild Man and not Bigfoot.
Yeah,
I didn't know that until I read this article. Shout out you for writing it.
Well, it makes sense. You're out in the in the Emerald Triangle. You're out in the middle of freaking nowhere. It's super dense, and you're just like, oh, that's one of those weird people living up in the woods with an outhouse.
What's crazy about the quote on the article is that they talk about how the voice was shrill or soprano and very human, like that of a woman in great fear. Mr. Dover could not see its footprints as it walked on hard soil. So who knows how big the feet are?
Yeah.
Bigfoot, no prints.
By the way, and we should mention this in terms of the validity of this legend.
Okay, here we go.
Well, no, this is in case you didn't listen.
In terms of the validity of this, okay.
In case you didn't catch our last podcast, the entire Sasquatch documentary on Hulu is about this murder that was occurred on a weed farm in the Emerald Triangle in the 1990s. And spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Sasquatch, just mute this right now or fast forward 30 seconds. But it came out that the local farmers actually made it up themselves. They brutally murdered 3 people, and they made it look like Bigfoot did it to keep different people from squatting on their land and growing weed. So they were like, hey, there's like some Bigfoot stuff going on here. Let's just exaggerate this to keep people away. So I do think a lot of these legends are exaggerated by the locals for a lot of different reasons. Financial, for, in this case, it was to keep weed growers out of their area. But it certainly adds to the legend when you have these stories of Bigfoot murdering people in Humboldt. So
yeah, easy number 1 on the top 10 legends of NorCal, Mr. Bigfoot.
Mr. Bigfoot, Mr. Big Shot. What's your favorite of the legends? Top 10 legends in NorCal.
That's a good question. I wasn't expecting that. My favorite, honestly, learning about Tenaya Canyon, Tenaya, whatever you want to call it, that was fascinating to me. Also, I really like the frozen bodies in Tahoe because, I just, again, love mafia stuff. But I think that my favorite is actually the real life Zorro. I actually think that that's kind of the coolest story to me. It's just one that, I don't know, I love Zorro. And so that just jumps out to me. And the fact that that is potentially a story from local NorCal legend is fascinating.
Yes.
What's your favorite?
It's Lemurians.
Lemurians, yeah.
I love Lemurians.
Lemurians. We're both, you're a bigger alien guy than I am, but, aliens are real. Now at this point, U.S. government is acknowledging.
And we won't get too into this because I could go on for an hour about this, but and there's a reason why people think aliens are around Mount Shasta and the whole Lemurians thing. I also just going through these stories of lost treasure was super fascinating because there's so many of them. There really are, and a lot of them are like, oh yeah, that sounds right. Oh yeah, that sounds right. The question is, did someone find them a long time ago and we just never heard of it? Because when it's gold, you don't take it to a bank and
when you find a treasure, do you announce it? And if so, when you announce it, do you still get to keep the treasure, or does some entity come in and say, oh no, we actually own this treasure?
So the Saddle Ridge Hoard, this couple in 2013, there are legit treasure people, and you quietly contact them, you bring it to them, they check out to see how valid it is, because when you find gold, you don't know exactly what it is or how much it's worth. They do it, they find someone to sell it to, it's all this process, and then they take obviously a percentage, but which that percentage was probably $1 million in their hands. But yes, so I like buried treasure, but Lemurian.
Well, I know we're wrapping up, but a good example is D.B. Cooper. D.B. Cooper famously jumped out of a plane with a big treasure, and they didn't find most of that treasure. He could have died. Somebody could have found that treasure and just went and spent it,
Totally. Cash, money.
So, a lot of these legends very well these treasures could have been found, and nobody was just like, I'm just not going to tell anybody. I'm just going to spend this money.
By the way, they think he jumped out in Oregon, but it's possible he could be in the upper reaches of Northern California.
Which is why it did not make the top 10, because most people believe it happened over in the Oregon area, not in Northern California.
But it's close. But it's
very close.
It's deep Southern Oregon. Yeah. So,
but that's a top 10. I think that was a great top 10.
That was a great top 10. Yeah. That was a fun podcast.
We actually talked much longer than we thought we would, which is good. That means we got a lot to say, and hopefully you guys enjoy listening and seeing it.
So we'll get back to our regularly scheduled podcast, but I just want to keep doing fun stuff like these as we think of them. We can talk about these different stories in Northern California and sort of put our take on them. And so hopefully we'll try to do one of these a month. Something like that.
Sure.
Yeah,
I love that you say that, and then that will definitely not happen. But
this was a fun one.
I agree.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Talking NorCal podcast. Once again, subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. Stitcher, Spotify. I always name all these, and it doesn't matter. Just wherever you get your podcast, go subscribe to us.
Let's see. Hey, okay, so it's the end. Let's see if we have any more.
I don't even know how to look these up.
So I'm limited on mine, but let's see if there's any new.
And he didn't say, but he's looking for comments.
I'm looking for
ratings.
comments on the ratings that we said. If you give us a rating and you write something, we'll give you a shout out. I still see the one that I've already read.
Yeah, I don't know how to look those up. So,
but again, J Mika for me,
the best podcast he's ever heard.
He, she. I'm thinking I read it as a she, but
go. We're gonna read it. Go and actually here. Let's up the stakes. If you go on our podcast and you rate us and give us a good review, I'm gonna pick one person and I'm gonna send you a T-shirt. Done and done. So go rate us right now. And in fact, I'm gonna put this on social media so people know. Go to the Talking NorCal podcast, subscribe to us, rate us, give us a favorable rating and a good comment, and I'll send you a T-shirt. Boom, bam, done. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube and social media, Talking NorCal and Active NorCal. Let us get in your eardrums and your eyeballs every single week. And thanks for listening. And remember, stay active.
NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and I could spend all day just chilling in the South Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and Darren knows how to kick it down in Santa Cruz. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we get a little cray-cray when we visit the East Bay. We're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we get a little mental when we visit Sacramento. Yeah, we're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and we protect nature's bounty when we visit Humboldt County. Yeah, we're NorCal, we're hella NorCal, and me, I'm hella cool 'cause I live in Sebastopol.